Have that debate right now.
No, we're not.
Okay.
There's some things that people don't need to hear.
I was going to share it with you. I thought it was a good life lesson, but apparently not.
No.
So, welcome to Lunch with PB&J. It is
22, welcome.
episode 22.
Episode 22.
It is not really lunchtime.
No, it's late, y'all.
It's actually super late. It's truly bedtime stories.
Do you really want to know what time it is?
It is truly an episode of Bedtime
It's
Stories.
10 o'clock.
With PB&J.
We should be sleeping.
And
But we're not. We're drinking coffee at 10 o'clock.
And we're talking to you. So this is really a bedtime story for you. And but we're gonna it's gonna be good. Mm-hmm. I like this story. This is one of my favorites as well.
Yeah.
Welcome everybody. I think I already said that, but
do they know what we're reading?
We are reading the story of Lazarus. Lazarus. Come forth!
This is not just for the podcast. He just randomly sings all the time. So he's got a song for everything.
I'm amazing on car trips. Correct?
Correct.
I am very entertaining on long car rides.
So this is John chapter 11.
She just wants to get into it.
Yes, I do. This is John chapter 11. I didn't even look. Is this is the story in Lazarus just in John?
It is.
Okay.
Well done. It is. It is the only it is only recorded in the Gospel of John.
Okay.
So, a little backstory? Wait,
Sure.
is that your way of saying you want a little backstory?
Sure.
Let me give you a little backstory then. A little backstory on the story of Lazarus. It is found in John chapter 11, as Joy just said. And this is the event. Probably, there's not a lot of backstory to this one outside of this is the story, and we're not going to cover it at the end, but this is the event, I should say, that leads to the Pharisees plotting to kill Jesus.
Okay.
I mean, they've been plotting to kill Jesus for a while, but this is the one. Because it's probably, like I realized this going through it, I'll make a reference to it at some point, but like this is, a lot of people believed in miracles because miracles were done. This was the first time anybody saw somebody raise somebody from the dead.
So it's like the cherry on top.
And so this was a big deal. And so Jesus, at the end of this story, Jesus leaves Jerusalem and doesn't come back. So he's in, it actually says that he's in where? Bethany, which is like a couple miles outside of Jerusalem. So it's basically Jerusalem. But he leaves the area and doesn't come back until his final week, which is very quick, very short little trip after this. But so it's coming, this is coming towards the end of Jesus' life. This is the other thing that's kind of interesting about John is it doesn't talk a lot about his life, like honestly his life and ministry. It's actually a very short few chapters on the life and ministry of Jesus, and then almost half of John is the final week and then leading up to the crucifixion, the resurrection, and what happens afterwards. So John really deals as much with that as he does the whole rest of Jesus' life. So It's kind of interesting, but this is what happens just before all of that. And let me jump into it, and I'll just tell you, let me read verses 1 through 3, because it's part of the backstory a little bit. Okay. It says, a man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters Mary and Martha. This is the Mary who later poured the expensive perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was sick, so the two sisters sent a message to Jesus telling him, Lord, your dear friend is very sick. So these three verses kind of give us all the backstory we need to go a little bit further into this. It is the story. There's four main characters in the story: Jesus, Mary, Martha, Lazarus. This is the same Mary and Martha from the Mary and Martha story that you're all very familiar with. Martha was the busybody, couldn't stop working, complaining about her sister who was lazy and just sitting at the feet of Jesus.
Jesus, make her work.
And then Jesus said, hey, she's chose the better thing. So you all know the Mary Martha story, very whatever. So same Mary and Martha.
So the fact it says this happened later tells us that's a
Yeah,
later
we've
story.
already, which is not in John, obviously, but it is in other Gospels.
Okay.
So what's interesting is like Mary and so Mary specifically, Mary is found in this particular Mary. There's a whole. We had this conversation
I was
coming
like,
over
there's
here.
like 33
There's
Marys.
there's a lot of Marys. And in case you didn't know that, there's a lot of Marys in the Bible. And this is the same Mary. She's actually found in all four Gospels. Mm-hmm. So she's in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Different scenarios, different stories, which I think also speaks to the fact that this family
Yes.
is very close to Jesus, and the fact that he keeps interacting with them.
Right.
So it really does show the closeness of the relationship that they have with Jesus. He would often stay at their house, as we read in the Mary and Martha story. Later on, when she comes and breaks the jar of perfume and anoints his feet, that is also, he's there having dinner. Like, it's just a very casual setting. These people were just friends of his.
Yeah.
So, so that's the Mary, the Mary, as it just said there. It's the same Mary that does the perfume. This is not, as some people, I was telling Joy, I read some things and getting ready for this where people are like, oh, this is Mary Magdalene. No, it's not. Totally different Mary. All right. So, anyway, and I just, this is a little side note, a little extra, but that story where she breaks the perfume, it says there in John, who later poured out. She does this later. And I've always told that story, and I love that story because when you read it in context, like when you read it kind of moving through the Gospel of John, you have this story where, spoiler alert, Lazarus dies and Jesus raises him from the dead. In case you didn't know, that's what's about to happen. And then a little later, Jesus is hanging at the house having dinner,
Right.
And it's like Mary's just, I've always said, like, can you imagine sitting across the table from Jesus, and you're just looking at Jesus, looking at your brother, they're laughing, they're talking, they're hanging out, they're just being friends, and just the overwhelming gratitude of, this man gave me my brother back.
You wonder, why did she break this jar of
this
expensive perfume?
Expensive perfume. So
Well, this is why. This
gratitude,
story.
it's this story right here. So, their appearances in all four Gospels, spent at the house. Now, as we come into this, as it says here, their brother is sick. Lazarus is sick. He's dying, and so they send word to Jesus. And what we're going to see here as we begin into the story, and again, spoiler alert, he dies. And what you're going to see is when they send word to Jesus, you're going to get from the reaction of Mary and Martha is they had great expectation that Jesus would come and heal Lazarus.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that's, I think we obviously probably knew that, but it really, that spoke to me. As I read through it
Kind of
this time.
helps you feel what they're feeling along the way if you know what their expectations were.
Yeah, and I think I wrote this little note down at the bottom is because this is such a familiar story, right? That I wrote down here at the bottom. Imagine reading this for the very first time. You've never been to church before. You've never read the Bible before. You never went to Sunday school, and you're reading this story for the very first time. And put yourselves at verse 1 and just start reading through this.
Yeah.
You find out that he's got a friend. His friend is sick. You're just getting to know a little bit about Jesus. And you're probably thinking, okay, cool. Jesus is going to come and heal his friend. It's going to be this great message of friendship. And then all of a sudden you read in the next verse that we're going to read, Jesus is like, yeah, sure, I'll be there in a few days. And you're just like, what? And I think if you don't know this story, so again, if you don't know the story, and sometimes I feel like when we read the Bible, we need to kind of put ourselves in the shoes of the people that are in the story where we don't know the ending. Because I always say, the faith of people in the Bible is amazing, but it's way more amazing when you don't know the end of the story.
Right.
And that's really where what we need to learn from is not the results, but the faith in the middle, because I feel like that's where we lack sometimes. Is it's easy to look at the stories, right? Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
There.
So again, we can all kind of relate to this story. Just you've told Jesus what's wrong. Have you ever told Jesus there's something wrong?
Just a few times.
Hey, Jesus, there's something wrong. and then wondered, why isn't he showing up?
Yeah.
And that's the in-between that we don't really get a picture of.
Right.
Is Jesus finds out he's sick, and then there's an in-between period where he dies, and then he shows up. What's going on in their heads in that in-between period, between when they've sent word to him and he just doesn't show up? And I don't know if I'm sure all of us have had moments where we've prayed and we've asked God for something. We've prayed and we've told Jesus about a situation, and then we feel like Jesus didn't show up.
Yeah. Because can you imagine them like, where is he? Where is he? Where is he? You know?
So for all of you listening, for all of you watching that have ever prayed and felt like Jesus didn't show up, this little story's for you. All right? Verse 4, Joy, you know the deal. Holla at me if I go past something.
Just a couple of more and I'll stop.
All right. 4 to 7 is where I'm planning to go. All right? But when Jesus heard about it, he said, Lazarus' sickness. That's one of those hard ones. But when Jesus heard about it, he said, Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of God will receive glory from this. So, although Jesus loved Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, he stayed where he was for the next 2 days. Finally, he said to the disciples, let's go back to Judea.
So the first line stands out to me because it says, a man named Lazarus was sick. And me being me. Lazarus,
did you look up the name?
I did.
The meaning of his...
The name Lazarus means God helps. And so you reword that and you say, a man named God helps was sick. You know, and just think about that. It's kind of, at this point, it's an oxymoron, you know. But obviously we're going to see it play out here. But it's just like this question of his name. His name even means God is going to help him. God helps. And yet we're not seeing that in the beginning of the story because he's sick and then he dies. And so it's this Jesus's response. So the part 2 where it says, verse 4, it says, but when Jesus heard about it, and said, Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. And that spoke to me, that part where it says it won't end in death, because I think it's this thing where Jesus sees the ending of things in our life, you know, and in this situation, he's seeing that this situation is not going to end in death. But it's, you know, God's got something for this. He's got a plan and a purpose. And I just kind of wrote down, you know, when the devil makes you sick, when there's an attack and the devil makes you sick, it ends in death because we know his purpose. The devil's purpose is to steal, kill, and destroy.
Yeah.
So whatever he messes with, the ending of that is death. But Jesus says here with Lazarus, this sickness is not going to end in death. Why? Because I have a purpose. And so it makes me, it just, you see this thing of when God allows you to go through something, maybe a sickness or a trial or a pain or a suffering, when God allows you to go through something and his hand is in it, it doesn't end in death.
Yeah.
It ends in resurrection.
That's good.
You know?
Yeah.
And so you see the difference of the purpose. And the devil's purpose is to steal, kill, and destroy. And God's purpose is to bring life. And so it just stood out to me, the fact it says, Lazarus' sickness is not going to end in death. And, yeah, I just thought that was powerful.
That's good. Yeah. No, I read this and I thought, man, this particularly these verses right here, and I thought, I am so thankful for the Bible, because it gives us a way to see the process of a miracle.
Yeah.
And to see the process of God working and moving. And here you have a critical situation, and yet you see the calmness, the mindfulness, the plan, the purpose, the reasons behind what Jesus is doing.
Right.
Which we don't always get. Again, we don't always get that in the moment, right? Sometimes we can look back on something and we see it, but in this particular situation, two things, like, so you read verse 4, but when Jesus heard. So Jesus heard the problem.
Right.
You ever prayed and wondered if Jesus heard you?
Yes.
Jesus heard what Mary and Martha.
Amen.
I like how she's answering me today.
I thought it was interactive.
All right, yeah. Again, sometimes we pray and we wonder, did Jesus hear what I said? So Jesus heard what Mary and Martha were asking for.
Right.
He heard the need, right? And then it says that Jesus, he knew. It says that it's not going to end in death. His sickness. So Jesus heard the problem and he knew the outcome.
Yeah.
And he's operating on that level.
Yeah.
He's playing, sometimes you hear, I don't know, I think it's a Star Trek reference, playing 4D chess. I've never watched Star Trek in my life.
I don't know what he's talking about.
Okay, I thought your dad watched Star Trek, right?
Yeah.
All right. I think that's a Star Trek, somebody tell me. I think that's a Star Trek reference, playing 4D chess.
What does that mean?
I don't know. The chessboards in Star Trek are like 4 levels or
You're
something.
saying he's on another level.
He's on another level. Jesus is thinking on another level. And so he's heard the problem, he knows the outcome, but he's not addressing it the way that you would expect. You'd expect him to just come. The outcome didn't match the request, right? Like they wanted Jesus to come and heal Lazarus, which technically he does. Heals him from death, though, instead of sickness.
Yeah.
And and that was the thing. That was what I thought is the present request demanded one type of miracle, but the outcome gave them a different miracle. And when we get caught up in our situation and like, did Jesus hear me? I don't think that Jesus heard me because it's not turning out the way.
Yeah, because where is he?
It's not. Yeah, he's not answering my need. He's not answering my request. But it doesn't mean that Jesus didn't hear you. He heard you, and he knows the outcome already. He's already working on that level.
And don't you think sometimes we get stuck in this? We only see God working in one way. And I think for Mary and Martha, although I'm sure they believed he could do anything, it was the way they thought he was going to fix this situation is to come and heal him.
Right.
That's what they were expecting.
And then there's this challenging thought here, all right? So it says here again that the purpose of the delay, I'm rewording it a little bit, the purpose of the delay was to glorify the Father.
Right.
Right? That's
Verse
4. Verse 4. It would happen for the glory of God so that the Son of God would receive glory from this. So that Jesus would be glorified, the Father would be glorified. Oftentimes, we will say as Christians that we want to live a life that glorifies God. Their brother had to die. They had to go through a time of mourning. Yes, Jesus is, but again, they don't know this in the moment. And so when we say that we want our lives to glorify God, does that go for the hard times as well?
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that just stood out to me today.
It's almost like, how much do we mean that?
Yeah, like how much do we mean that? Do we understand that sometimes things don't work the way that we want them to?
Yeah.
But it's so that God can get the glory through it.
Right.
And so sometimes even in the hard times, God is working and God is moving and God is going to use the hard times to bring glory to himself. Right. But in order for that to work, we've got to continue to maintain our faith and to continue to trust and believe and walk with him.
And you don't always think that it's going to cause like, hey, God, I want you to get the glory. Sometimes you don't always think that it might be something that could cause you great pain.
Right, yeah. And so that's a question that we have to ask. And I'll tell you, when I read through this, I saw something that I saw it differently than I've seen it before. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But and then the last thing in this section, then we'll move on, is just verse 5. It says, so although Jesus loved Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, he stayed where he was for the next 2 days. That's another hard one.
Yeah.
That it's this idea of although he loved them. And it's this idea of that just because Jesus doesn't show when we want him to, it doesn't mean he doesn't love you.
Because how many times, maybe it's just me that's done this, but how many times like have you told God, if you love me, you're not going to allow me to go through this, right? And that's not the case here.
Yeah. There's so much established in these first 6 verses.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably, that verse right there is probably one of the most important verses.
Yeah.
That I'll be honest with you, I've blazed over in the past. But I think that's a verse that we need to meditate on and to resonate with. Of although Jesus loved them, he still stayed where he was for the next 2 days. He let Lazarus die.
Yeah.
Because there was a plan, there was a purpose, there was an outcome that was coming. But it didn't mean that he stopped loving them. Just because he didn't show up when they asked him to.
That'll preach.
That dog will hunt.
I think soon you'll be getting to chapter 11, so maybe you can preach on that.
So here we go. But his disciples objected, Rabbi. How far am I going here? I'm going to verse 11. But his disciples objected, Rabbi. Only a few days ago, the people in Judea were trying to stone you. Are you going there again? Jesus replied, there are 12 hours of daylight every day. During the day, people can walk safely. They can see because they have the light of this world. But at night, there is danger of stumbling because they have no light. Then he said, excuse me, my coffee. Then he said, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but now I will go and wake him up. You have anything in there?
So that part, it says, but the disciples objected. So he's going back to Judea, and it says, but his disciples objected. In that statement, they just tried to stone you. Are you going there again? And it just made me really think, like, why do we object to the plan of God? Why do we object to the purpose and plans of God sometimes when we're... And I felt like it's because the disciples didn't understand his purpose. If they had understand his purpose fully, and what was going to happen in hindsight, like I don't think they would have objected. But it's this: why do you object sometimes from the plans and the purposes of God? And I think it's this: we really have to seek his purpose, because it's so easy to just to say, no, God, I don't think this is. I don't think this is a good idea. And it's funny because for us to even tell God hey, I don't think this plan of yours is a good idea. And it's Jesus.
It struck me funny because I thought poor Mary and Martha. Yeah. Like, right. they're asking, hey, come and see our son, or come and heal our brother. And then they know he's dead, right? Yeah. At this point, they know he's passed away. And so Jesus is like, okay, we're going to go. And they're like, no, we can't go. And I'm just thinking... It might
put you in danger.
I'm thinking of their point of view of just going, wow, thanks, guys. Like, the one person that can comfort us through this, and you're telling them not to come to us.
Yeah. And it almost makes, like, even the part where it says, only a few days ago the people tried to stone you. Are you going there again? And I read things a lot of times in the context of, okay, what does this mean to me? And it made me feel like, think about the verse that talks about, what's the one verse that talks about sometimes you'll have to shake the dust off your feet, and move on. There's going to be times where God says, shake the dust off your sandals and move on, meaning you can't do any more here. Right. But then there's other times where God's going to tell you to go back to a situation that maybe you want to object to, because you're like, hey, this is risky. Hey, these people, they tried to stone me before, verbally. They rejected me, because this is what the disciples were telling him. These people did not receive you. Don't, they're going to kill you. Don't go back there. And so I think there's these moments where God's going to tell us to leave a place, and we listen to his Holy Spirit, and we're done in that situation. And then there's going to be situations where God asks us to go back. Because he has something he wants to do. Yeah. And I think it just comes back to before you object to God and say, no, that's not a good idea. He'll tell us his purpose and plans if we ask him. Yeah. And I think we have to know his purpose and plans. Otherwise, we don't get it.
Well, and two, I think just the faith of. Man, why do we question God? I don't have anything else on that. Like just listening to you talk. And I'm like, man, we do this so often of, hey, Jesus, are you crazy? Yeah. Like, what do you mean? And I think it's our own peril. If it's our own peril, if it's an inconvenience, there's all these different things that can stop us from just doing what he wants to do, to see him to see himself glorified in and through us, and even to show it. Like in this example here, like Jesus is about to show his disciples something that's really, really important.
Right.
And if he listens to them, they don't see it.
Yeah.
And this is a huge thing that's about to happen. And so, yeah, it's just...
But like you look at him and he's not hindered. He's
Right.
not deterred by going back into this situation where a group of people probably want to, stone him and kill him. He's not deterred by that because he knows his purpose.
And the reason for that, like part of the reason he has such confidence in that is not just simply because he's Jesus. Although, he's got that card to play as well. But the secret lies in this other thing that he talks about here, where he says there are 12 hours of daylight every day. During the day, people can walk safely. They can see because they have the light of this world. And so he's talking about that. And what that's referring to is this idea of purpose. And this idea of a certain amount of time. We're given a certain amount of time, and that is a predetermined time. Jesus, we know, like there's in Revelation, it says that the Lamb was slain before the foundations of the earth. Before the earth was ever created, God knew when Jesus would die. Right? So when Jesus, and throughout the Gospels, constantly Jesus is using terminology like my time is, remember,
My time is not
my
yet
time
come.
is not yet come. It's not my hour. It's
Right.
all these things. Like Jesus knew when he was going
He
to
was
die.
aware of his time.
And he was aware, he was acutely aware of his time. And so in this example, he's letting them know, listen, there's 12 hours of daylight every day. That's when we can travel safely. And he's like, my time has not yet come. So it's still time for me to work.
Meaning, like, what I have to do right now is time sensitive. It must be done now.
Yeah, it's got to be done now. And this whole idea of there's 12 hours in a day and you can travel safely. Again, there was, when night would fall is when you couldn't travel because it was dangerous and all these things. But Jesus, like, now is the time. No danger is going to come to me right now because this is the time frame that I am to do work and to do ministry.
Yeah.
And nothing bad is going to happen to me. So I can go back into this area where they're threatening to stone me. And I'm going to go back into this area and I'm going to do something here because my buddy Lazarus has died and I'm going to go wake him up. So just chill out. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine.
If you go back, I really encourage you to read chapter 9, 10, and 11 if you get a chance, because they kind of just flow with what's going on. And so John chapter 9, Jesus heals a blind man, and the disciples come to him, and before he heals them, they say, why is this man born blind? Was it a sin, his parents' sin? And so Jesus says, neither. This happened to give God glory. And then he says, it is John 9, 3 through 5. It says, Jesus says, we must quickly carry out the task assigned to us by the one who sent us. The night is coming when no one can work, but while I'm here in the world, I am the light of the world. And like literally the response in that story is very much the same as this response, where it's like Jesus is saying, now's the time for me to work and act. It's time sensitive, and I think that's so cool because you got two different stories, but he's trying to relay the same. He's trying to tell them the same thing.
It's good stuff. Verse, let's knock out a couple more here. It says, the disciples said, Lord, if he's sleeping, he will soon get better. They thought Jesus meant Lazarus was simply sleeping, but Jesus meant Lazarus had died. So he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there, for now you will really believe. Come on, let's go see him.
Don't you like it when Jesus just talks plainly?
Just talks plainly. Thomas, nicknamed the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let's go too and die with Jesus. Interesting few little verses here. One, Doubting Thomas had a nickname before he was known as Doubting Thomas.
The twin.
The twin. That's a way better
That's better.
nickname. Way better nickname
So
than
he was a
Doubting
twin.
Thomas. So apparently he was a twin. So that's one thing. That wasn't really what I was going to talk about, though. What stood out to me there is just, he says, he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there. So now you'll really believe.
Yeah, imagine.
Now you'll believe.
Yeah.
And this was, as I said earlier at the beginning, this was such an important miracle for Jesus. Yeah. This miracle, he'd been healing the sick. He'd been blind eyes can see, paralyzed can walk. He'd been doing these miracles.
Multiplying the loaves and fishes.
Feeding 5,000 people. He'd been doing all of this. This was the miracle that was going to show the disciples that he had the power of life and death.
Right.
He had power over life and death. And so he's telling them, listen, I'm glad he died. I'm glad I wasn't there to heal him. Because he might have been thinking, if I went when they asked me to, we'd have showed up. You guys would have gone into town, grabbed something to eat. I'd have gone in to see the friends and family. Wouldn't be that big of a deal. It's not a big crusade. I'm just going to go in and see them. No sense in flooding the house with everybody. I'll just go in. I'm going to pray for him. He gets healed. Boom. You've seen me do that before. There's no stretch of the imagination there. There's no stretch of the faith there even. You've seen me do this over and over again. I'm about to do something that's going to blow your minds.
Right.
I'm about to show you. And this is what Jesus did throughout his ministry with the disciples, is he constantly revealed layers upon layers upon layers
Talk about taking it to
of his
another
power.
level.
Yeah. So he's about to take it to a whole nother level. And just imagine the impact on the disciples by witnessing the miracle firsthand.
Yeah. Well, because let me just put it in perspective. Have you ever seen anybody healed?
Yes.
I've seen people healed too. Have you ever seen anybody raised from the dead?
No.
So I'm just trying to put that in perspective of like what that truly would be like to experience. It is taking it to another level.
To watch it unfold right in front of your eyes it would just be just mind-blowing.
Yes.
Just absolutely mind-blowing. And so this is the reality of what Jesus is showing here. And then I loved the little part there with Thomas the twin, of just saying to his fellow disciples, let's go and die with Jesus. Like, what a contrast. Like, just, this is a complete side note, guys. What a contrast to the Doubting Thomas moniker that he has carried for 2,000 years now. This is the Thomas that was the disciple of Jesus.
This is the Thomas that says, let's go die with him. I'm by his side.
This is the Thomas that says, I will give my life for Jesus. And if Jesus says we're going to go, then let's go with him.
Yeah.
I'm willing to die with him. Are you guys willing to die with him as well? And so if that's what's going to happen, that's what's going to happen. But we're going to follow him, live or die, life or death. We're going to follow Jesus into wherever he's going as well.
Yeah, and like this. So the verse 15, and for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there, for now you will really believe. Now you will really believe. Like, it stands out to me because I've always read the story in kind of just the context of, okay, the reason Jesus let Lazarus die is for at the very end, what we're going to see, that people come to know him, that people who are unsaved get saved, right? So for me, just kind of reading the whole context, reading the story and thinking, okay, Jesus, that's why you did this. That's why. And it is a part of why he did it. But I feel like I've missed this part right here in the sense it says, for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there. Because I'm gonna do something that you need to see. I'm going to do something that's going to benefit you. I'm going to do something that's going to strengthen your faith. And I think I forget that sometimes, where you just think it's about, this group of people got saved, they saw it, and like, these are the men that are traveling with them that you would think, there's no doubt in their mind. There's no doubt. And then also thought about it in the sense of, I feel that verse like speaks to me, because have you ever seen God do something and God's used it, and glory has been given to him, and people have gotten saved through it, and yet what's it do? I mean, we've been Christian for a long time. I've been a believer for a long time, and yet when I see a miracle happen, when I see God at work, like, what's it do for me as a believer? So I don't care if you've been a Christian 20 years, when you see God do something, it's going to be for your benefit too. It's not just for the unbeliever's benefit. And this is again, these are the 12 guys. 11 of the 12. Hey, one got replaced, right?
But these guys, these are going to be the guys that start the church.
Yeah.
These are going to be the guys that take the gospel to the known world at that time. And they're going to face an incredible amount of persecution.
Yes.
And there's going to be struggles.
It's about to get real.
All but one of them are going to die a martyr's death.
Yeah.
Right? And for your benefit, for your sakes, I'm glad that you're about to see what I can do. Because what is the greatest thing that people fear? Death.
Yeah.
The greatest fear that people have is death. And he's about to show them death means nothing.
Wow. Yeah.
Death means nothing.
Yeah.
And not only is he going to raise Lazarus from the dead, but he's going to explain this to Martha in a second too. Like, I'm the resurrection and the life.
Yeah.
Every hope that you have for eternal life is in me.
Yeah.
So, guys, this is this is all just setting up what he's about to do.
And again, just like you've mentioned before, it's a deeper level of what they've seen. They've seen healing. They've seen him, multiply wine, multiply food. They've seen him do miracles. This is different.
It's a new kind of miracle. This is a life-changing, literally life-changing kind of miracle.
Yeah.
So let's go. Verse 17. When Jesus arrived at Bethany, he was told that Lazarus had already been in his grave for 4 days. Now, pause. That is significant. Okay. 4 days. Do you know why it's significant?
No.
Have you've heard this before?
No. Tell me.
I think you've heard this.
Teach me something.
So in that day, 4 days was significant because they believed that after 3 days is when you gave up the ghost, or when the spirit left the body.
Okay.
And so there's a whole
Jewish tradition.
I'm not going to go into it all, but yeah, there's a whole tradition there around rituals and different things that would go on. But it was like after 3 days is when they believed that the spirit actually left the body. And so the significance of Lazarus being in the grave 4 days is not just how long it took Jesus to get there, but in order for Jesus' miracle to be a miracle to everybody.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't like a Jewish custom, like, oh, this is based on the book of Deuteronomy. This was like more of an old wives' tale kind of tradition, folklore kind of thing that was, and so but there was this belief that it took 3 days.
So let's say if it was a shorter amount of time, they would have thought, oh, his spirit.
He wasn't really dead,
right? Okay.
He wasn't really dead. His spirit was just literally just asleep. And so there's actually a great significance to the fact that Jesus showed up 4 days. He'd been in the tomb for 4 days.
So to put it in context with us, hey, their body wasn't just laying there 3 minutes without breath in them, and it's still warm.
Right.
It's been cold a day.
You hear these stories of people coming. Yeah, right. You're right. You hear these stories of people coming back from that. I experienced death. I died.
Yeah.
I went to heaven. I came back, and people are like, did they though, or were they just unconscious? Yeah. Were they, it was a coma type situation or whatever. That's there's a significance to the fact that he was there for 4 days because it meant that everybody that was there witnessing this would have known
it's a miracle.
Dang, he was really dead. he was for sure. He'd given up. I read that somewhere. That's why I use that phrase, is gave up the ghost. That was actually how they worded it. Anyway, Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem, 2.8 kilometers
Where
to be exact.
Where are you at? Sorry.
Verse 18.
Okay.
Down the road from Jerusalem, and many of the people had come to console Martha and Mary in their loss. When Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary stayed in the house. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask."
I didn't write anything down for that, but I just kind of, I so identify, when you read it in that way, you just read what their emotions would be and your own life stories. And I feel like I've been through those similar situations where just like, God, if you had done something, this would not have turned out this way. But then there's still that hope. Like, I feel like this next statement is a statement of hope, but even now I know God will give you whatever you ask. So it's like, even now I know, God, you can change it. So you see her disgust or despair. I don't know how you want to word that, but you also see her hope.
So that interesting that you said disgust.
Okay.
Which, by the way, Joy is in my chair. I don't know if you noticed that.
I'm
She's in the
higher.
big chair, and I feel like I'm looking up at her.
You should look
I
up
keep
to
sitting
me.
up. I keep sitting up straight so I can look you in the eye.
I'll slouch so you don't have to.
Anyway, just because I've always read this story with the idea that that Martha was like. I've always looked at Martha as this sassy lady. She had a little sass because of the other story.
Yeah.
And she was always very vocal. She was
So you've
complaining.
done the same thing for doubting Thomas.
She's Martha the sassy.
He's labeled her.
Sassy Martha. And I've always read that. This time, though, I don't know why, but this time I don't see her as that.
Yeah.
And it's because of this statement,
Yeah.
where she says, because honestly, like I've preached out of this story before
The second
over the
part
years.
of the statement.
Yeah, and I've preached out of this, and in just a second, you're going to see Mary also says basically word for word the same thing that Martha does. If you would have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. But I've always said it like more sassy with Martha, like was more accusatory. Like she got up in his grill,
Yeah.
and was angry with him. But you're right, like that secondary statement. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask, and it's this idea. Like I just got this picture of, okay, listen, if you would have come,
Yeah.
my brother wouldn't have died. You would have done a miracle
Yeah.
and healed my brother.
Yeah.
But even now, even though the miracle didn't happen the way I thought it would,
Yeah.
I still trust you.
And wow, when you word it that way, honestly, too, isn't that something that we need to be able to say? Because how many times do things not go like we planned, but we still have to come to this place where we're like, God, we still are giving it to you. Because I
Yeah.
feel like that's a surrendering statement.
Yeah.
What she's saying is, but even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask. She's still surrendering
Yeah.
to whatever his plan is.
Yeah. And whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
It's this thing of, I wanted you to come and heal my brother. You didn't do that. My brother died.
Yeah.
I don't know what you've got planned, but I still believe that God will do whatever you ask him to do.
Yeah.
And so I'm trusting you with what comes next. And I think that's sometimes where we struggle, is that idea of, okay, I'm asking God to do a miracle, but then when the miracle doesn't happen, we're done.
It's almost like a messy faith. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like it's faith, but it's not this cute faith that wrapped up in a bow. It's messy sometimes.
Yeah.
But you still come to this place with God where you're like, but God, you can still work in my life. I'm still not gonna walk away from you. I'm still not gonna lose my hope in you.
She's still, that second statement, that first statement is, I thought you were going to come and do a miracle.
Yeah.
The second statement is, I still expect you to
Do something.
do something.
Yeah.
She hasn't lost the expectation. And I think for us, I think that's what we have to hear. And that's where we have to get to, is that even when God doesn't do what we want him to do, it doesn't mean that we should stop expecting. And I just talked about this on Sunday, and so that's why I think this idea of expectation is really resonating with me lately.
Yeah.
Of just, do you carry an expectation for a miracle? Do you carry an expectation that Jesus can heal?
Yeah.
Can
Because
move?
don't you think it's fair to say when you lose expectation, basically you lose faith? Expectation to me equals faith. So
Yeah.
when we lose expectation, we lose faith.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I see in that second part of her statement, I see the expectation is still there. And sometimes, again, we're tempted to give up after it appears that God is too late.
Yeah.
After it appears that God's too late to do a miracle. We're tempted to give up. And I just, like, you read this, and again, within the context of this story, but put it in the context of your own life.
Yeah.
Is are you willing to continue to believe and expect God to move even when your miracle dies? Even when what you're believing God for dies. You know, you're believing God to heal your marriage and you just feel like your marriage is dead. You're praying for God to restore a relationship and the relationship still feels dead. You're asking for God to do a miracle in your finances and they just feel dead.
Yeah.
You know, whatever it might be, it's physical healing.
Yeah.
You're praying for a physical healing and it just doesn't seem to be happening. It seems to die when the miracle, they were asking Jesus to heal their brother and their brother dies. The very thing they were believing for a miracle for dies. And yet she kept believing.
Yeah.
There was an expectation that was still there. Do you believe that Jesus can bring it to life? I don't know. Like, was she asking Jesus to bring him to life? Or was there just an expectation of, hey, I don't know what's going on right now, but I trust you. Hey guys, we're going to stop right there for this week. We're going to break it up into 2 weeks again. Thank you so much for being with us today. Hey, if you're listening to this, watching this, do us a favor. Make sure you follow us, subscribe to the channel, click the notification button up there so you don't miss anything. Also, please comment, rate, do whatever you can. The more you do those things, it's just how these things called algorithms work. It gets the word out there a little bit more. We'd love for you to share this with somebody else that you know, because we are doing this so that others will come to have a deeper understanding of the Word of God as well. And so thank you so much for being with us. Tell your friends and family all about Lunch with PB&J. See you next week.